All right, this is section 6.7 over simple interest, and interest is money paid or earned for borrowing money. So you probably have heard about interest before, maybe on commercials, or maybe you've heard your parents talk about it. A lot of times with loans, actually every time you borrow money in a loan, you're going to have to pay interest back on it. So interest can be good and it can be bad. It's good if we're letting the bank borrow the money. So you can earn interest if you deposit it into the bank. A lot of times they'll give you a really small interest rate in a CD, certificate of deposit, or in a savings account, and you can actually earn money for letting the bank borrow yours and having an account with them. But most of the time when we think of interest, we think of paying money, and you have to pay extra money anytime you borrow it. So whether you're buying a car, got to take a car loan out, a house, got to take a mortgage out, or whatever, you are borrowing money and you have to pay money back. Okay, so some vocabulary for us. The amount of money borrowed or deposited is called the principal. Okay, so that's the amount that you start with. Okay, so if you are putting money into the bank, if you open an account and you put $500 in a savings account, that's your principal. If you are buying a car and you borrow $7,000 from the bank, then that $7,000 is your principal. And simple interest is money paid or earned only on the principal. Okay, there are other types of interest called compound interest, which is interest on interest on interest, and that's what credit cards use. Credit cards will use compound interest, and that's how credit card companies make a lot of money off people that don't know how to use credit cards. They put too much money on there, and then they become way in debt. Simple interest is something that you use if you're borrowing money from a bank for a car or for a house. And it's a lot easier to calculate, and it's also a lot easier on you as far as interest is concerned. You don't have to pay as much money back. All right, and this is our simple interest formula, or sometimes I call it the IPERT formula. You've got 4 different variables. You've got I, which stands for interest, P that stands for principal, R that stands for rate, and T that stands for time. In just a second, we'll talk about what these different variables stand for, or how you find these different variables. But they're always going to give you 3 of these variables. So for the first few problems we're going to do, we're actually going to be able to use the principal, the rate, and the time to find the interest. Now, because these letters are being squeezed together, we can see that we would just multiply the P, the R, and the T variables together, the numbers we're going to plug in for them together, and that's going to give us the interest. All right, so as I mentioned, the I stands for interest. And remember, again, interest is that fee for borrowing money. So we have to pay back extra money on top of whatever we borrowed. So you borrow $2,000 from the bank, you're going to have to pay back like $2,200 or $2,300, not just the $2,000 you borrowed. That's how they get money from you. Then we've got the principal. The principal, we said, was the amount of money that you borrowed, or if you're putting it into the bank, you're investing. So that's the money we start with. And then we've got rate. Now the rate is the percent. Okay, the percent that's charged or earned if you're earning the money. And because we typed it into our calculator, you probably guessed we're going to write this in decimal form. And then the final variable is time, and the length, that's the length of the loan, and it's always measured in years. That's important, that time is always measured in years. Okay, there'll be some problems where they might tell you the months, and we have to convert that into years. All right, so let's talk about finding the interest and balance first. So in this problem, it says you put $500 in a savings account. The account earns 3% simple interest per year. Part A, what is the interest earned after 3 years? And part B, what is the balance after 3 years? So I always start off all these problems writing I equals, P equals, R equals, and T equals, and then I read through the problem and I just plug in whatever they're giving us as far as the information here. So that $500, the first thing I want to do is circle it. For that $500, I got to figure out, okay, that's going to go somewhere into my equation. Because it says this is the money we're putting into the account and we're starting with this, this is actually the principal. The principal is $500. It says the account earns 3% simple interest, and that interest rate is our percentage, and I'm going to put that as my rate, but remember I write it in decimal form, so 3% is 0.03. And then the time here, it says, what is the interest earned after 3 years? So that time is what I put in for t. So my interest formula says I equals PRT, IPERT, and I'm just going to plug in the numbers they're given to me. I don't know what I is. That's what it says. It says find the interest, right? So I equals P for 500 times R, which is 0.03, times T, which is 3. And if you multiply 500 times 0.03 times 3, you get $45. So we have now answered part A in this problem, which said, what is the interest earned after 3 years? But part B says, what is the balance on the account? Well, assuming I don't put any extra money in this account, I'm still going to have the $500 that I put in, but I've also earned $45 interest. So when I come back to the bank, not only will I have the $500 in there, but I'll have earned $45 in interest. So I just add those two together, and that means my balance is $545. $545. That's my account balance. And so now I've answered part A and part B. All right, part C of this problem says, what is the account balance after 9 months? So everything being the same, we still have $500 for the principal. We still have an interest rate of 3%. We still are trying to find what the interest is here so we can find the account balance, but they've changed our time to now be 9 months. So a common mistake here would be to plug 9 in for time, but that's not true, okay? Because time, remember, is always measured in years. This is not a full year. Plugging 9 in would mean that you're doing 9 years. So that's not how long it's in for. So we don't want to write 9. What we have to think is how many months are there in a year? And there are 12 months in a year. So 9 months would be 9 out of the 12, which reduces to 3/4, which actually as a decimal, because I want to use my calculator here, is 0.75. So this is 0.75 of a year, and that's what I'm going to plug in for time, is 0.75. Okay, so now I'm going to redo this whole thing. I equals PRT, our interest formula, and I don't know what I is, but I do know that the principal was 500. The rate is still 3%. And the time is now 9 months, which is 0.75 of a year. So when I multiply 500 times 0.03 times 0.75, I'll get my interest, I, to equal $11.25. Now it's significantly smaller because last time I had it in for 3 years. Now I'm not even leaving it in for a full year. So you can see the interest amount is going to be much lower. But because it says what is the account balance, right? I still need to find the interest, but it says what is the account balance? Well, remember, I put $500 in, so add $500 onto that. I've earned an extra $11.25, which means now I have $511.25. Not as much as last time because I didn't leave it in the bank for as long. So $511.25. All right, so we solved for I in this equation, which is really easy. Just multiply P, R, and T. Now let's figure out what if we're missing R? What if R is the variable we're missing and we need to plug in all the other ones and solve for R? So I'm going to start writing I equals, P equals, R equals, and T equals. And I'm just going to write these in as we read this problem. It says you put $1,000 in your savings account. And I'm going to stop right there because we need to put that $1,000 somewhere. Whoops. That $1,000 is what we start with, so that's going to be our principal. That's how much we're putting into the account. It says the account earns $100 of interest. Okay, so that's I here. So we put $100 in for I. Last time we didn't have I, now we do. It says you're leaving it in there for 4 years. So that's our time, and it is measured in years, so I can go ahead and put 4 right there. It says, what is the annual interest rate? And remember, that is going to be written as a percent. So when we get our answer, we have to write it as a percent. So go ahead and I'm going to write my IPERT formula. I equals PRT. I'm going to plug in 100 for I. Whoops. 100 for I. I'm going to plug in 1,000 for P. I don't know what R is, but I do know that T is 4. So to solve for R, I go ahead, now on the right side of the equation we have the R, right? We want to get R by itself. So what I can do is I can go ahead and I can multiply the two numbers that I do have. 1,000 times 4 is 4,000. And then I can just write it like that, 4,000 times R. And then I can copy down this 100 equals, and then to get R by itself, to get rid of the 4,000 that's being multiplied, we're going to divide by 4,000. So all we have to do to find R is 100 divided by 4,000. And that's going to give us, for R, running out of room here, that's going to give us 0.025. Now remember that interest rate is always written as a percentage. So I'm going to write this as 2.5, because I have to move the decimal to the right twice. 2.5% is my interest rate. So if you're missing one of the variables on the right side of the equation, like we were missing R right there, multiply the two numbers that you do have together and then divide that number over so you can solve for that missing variable. All right, now we are going to find time. So T is going to be our missing variable here. It says a bank offers 3 savings accounts. The simple interest rate is determined by the principal. Part A. How long does it take an account with a principal of $800 to earn $100 in interest? Notice that it said how long. You can see that we're missing the time here. That's what we're going to try to find. So I'm going to start off by writing I equals, P equals, R equals, and T equals. And I know T is going to be what I'm missing, so I'm not going to plug anything in for that. It says, how long, part A says, how long does it take an account with a principal of $800, so that is our principal, that goes in for P, to earn $100 in interest. That's going to go in for I. Now, they don't give us our interest rate, but they do tell us, if you look over here, they give us, there are 3, it says the simple interest rate is determined by the principal. So you can see, look at this picture over here, there are 3 different rates you can earn. The more money you put in the bank, the more they give you as far as an interest rate. Because we are putting in $800, that's going to put us right here at 2% because we're putting in between $500 and $5,000. Less than 5,000 or less than 500 is 1.5%, 500 to 5,000 is 2%, and more than 5,000 they give you a 3%. So our interest rate here is going to be 2% or 0.02. So now we actually had to look at that picture, but we can see we're using a 2% interest rate. So we write I equals PRT, all right, per formula down, and we're going to plug in $100 for I. We're going to plug in $800 for a principal. We're going to plug in 0.02 for our rate, and then we don't know what our time is. So we are given 2 of the 3 numbers on this side, so we're going to multiply the 2 numbers that we do have together. 800 times 0.02 is 16. So 16 times T, and then 100 equals. And then to get T by itself, just like we did last time, we're going to divide it over. Divide by 16, divide by 16, and 100 divided by 16 is 6.25. So 6.25 years is how I would label that, and that is our answer. But because I want you guys to be smart about this, let's think about what 6.25 years would be. We know that's 6 years. And then 0.25 is 1/4. So if there are 12 months in a year, 1/4 of them, if you divide 12 by 4, is 3. So that is the same as 6 years and 3 months. 6.25 years would be 6 years and 3 months. That's how long it would take us to earn $100 in interest. So quite a bit of time, but we also didn't put that much money in the bank, and our interest rate is only 2%. So it takes us quite a bit of time to earn $100 in interest. Part B says, how long does it take an account with a principal of $10,000 to earn $750 in interest? So again, I'm going to write I equals, P equals, R equals and T equals when I solve this problem. It says a principal of $10,000. That's going to be our P variable, 10,000. It's a comma right there. And then to earn our interest of $750 in interest. Now, if you put in $10,000, you can look up here, our interest rate up here says that's going to be 3%, right? 3% for our interest because we're putting in over $5,000. So if our interest rate is 3%, then I'm going to use 0.03 for R. And then I can go ahead and get started. I equals PRT, principal times rate times time. And I'm going to plug in 750 for I. I'm going to plug in 10,000 for P. I'm going to plug in 0.03 for R. And I still don't know what T is. I'm going to find that missing time. So I multiply the two numbers that I do have on that side. 10,000 times 0.03 is $300. So I can simplify a little bit. I can go ahead and copy that 750 equals down. And then to get T by itself, we're going to divide both sides by 300. And 750 divided by 300 is 2.5. So our time is 2.5. So 2.5 years is how long it would take us to earn $750 interest. Now, that would be the same as 2 years. And then 0.5 is half, and half of those 12 months would be 6, right? 6 months is half a year. So 2.5 years is the same as 2 years and 6 months. All right, so now we're going to find the amount paid on a loan. So we've talked about, you've earned interest by depositing it into the bank. We've had several problems where we put money into the bank. Now we're going to talk about money where we borrow it. And you can already see that when we borrow money, the interest rate is already higher. We've looked at 2% interest rate, 3% interest rate, but the banks aren't as friendly to you when you're borrowing money from them. And you can see we've got a 5% interest rate. I'm going to go ahead and write down I equals P equals, R equals, and T equals. And we're going to plug in 0.15 for our interest rate because that's what 15% is a decimal. It says that you borrow $600 to buy a violin. The amount of money that you borrow or put into the bank, this time we're borrowing, is always called the interest or the principal. It's the amount that we start with. Okay, so the $600 is the principal. It says you pay off the loan after 5 years. So that 5 is going to be our time. How much do you pay for the loan? Now, when it says how much do you pay for the loan, we're going to need to know what the interest is, but not just the interest. Obviously, we're going to pay back the entire $600 plus the interest. So we start off by writing our interest formula, I equals PRT, and we don't know what I is. And we do know that the principal is 600. We know that the rate is 0.15. And we know that the time is 5. So we calculate that. 600 times 0.15 times 5 is $450. So I equals $450. And that is the interest that we're going to pay on this. And so when it says how much do you pay for the loan, just like we did at the very beginning of this section, we're going to take that interest and we're going to add it on to the amount we borrowed, and that's going to give us $1,050. So a $600 violin just ended up costing you $1,050 to pay for it. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, the interest rate is higher. Okay. Number two, it took you 5 years to pay off this loan. It should not take you 5 years to pay off $600. I'm sorry, but it should not take you that long. The longer it takes you, the more interest you pay. Okay? And those two things combined give us $1,050. So you probably would have been better off if you would have waited till you had $600 saved up before you bought the violin. Because borrowing $600 at that interest rate for 5 years costs you $1,050. All right, part B of this problem says, if you pay the loan off after only 2 years, how much money will you save? So let's go ahead. We still have the I equals, P equals, R equals, and T equals, and everything's the same. We're still borrowing 600. Our interest rate is still 15%, but instead of putting 5 here, we're lowering the time down to 2 years. So now we can calculate first how much interest are we going to pay, and then finally we can calculate what we would have to pay back. So our interest, I, we don't know. Principal was 600. The rate is still 15%, and the time is now 2 years. So if you do 600 times 0.15 times 2, you get $180 for our interest. Now, that's the interest we earn, right? So we're going to have to pay that back, plus we're going to have to pay back the amount we borrowed, the principal, and that's going to give us $780 that we would have to pay for the violin. Now compare that to up here, the $1,050 that we were going to have to pay, right? That's a lot cheaper, and the only thing that changed is that we paid off the loan sooner. So that really does matter. You want to pay off your loans as soon as you can so you can save money. So it says, how much money will you save? Well, we did pay, or we're going to pay $1,050, but if we pay it off in 2 years, we only have to pay $780. So if you subtract those, $1,050 minus $780, you get $270 is how much money we actually save just by paying the loan off sooner than later. All right, so that's all the notes we have for this section. So if you have any questions, please let me know.